Thank you very much, both of you. I was just thinking, we have an open day tomorrow, and I think I'll keep your presentation well away from from the discussion
Let them know.
that we're going to have. So, I must say, I was some very different perspectives on the future. I must admit, I was sitting there thinking I didn't know which I kind of preferred. That the rather sort of dystopian realism that you presented, Suhail, or the equally troubled, I suppose, by the more utopian idea of freedom from self that you present in Noboru. So a couple of things that I think that maybe both of you seem to touch on was one idea about money and consumption. I think you both kind of indicated there was a lot of money being generated somewhere. And yet there was very little of that money to spend in certain areas. And Suhail, you talked about the idea that actually, as markets increased, artists became more impoverished, and particularly those in education. And Noboru suggested that there was little consumption taking place. I wanted to kind of you raised the notion of fear, Noboru, and I just wanted to ask Suhail whether in a sense, I know you're not looking. I know you're looking. I think you're looking to kind of figure an analysis, and you're not looking to kind of suggest that there's a way out of this. You're not in your position to kind of look for that. But what role do you think fear plays in all of this? Is that a kind of a quality or characteristic that rang true or that had any relevance for you?
I am interested in looking for ways out of this.
Okay, sorry.
I was presenting this as a problem.
Okay,
not as a kind of like awesome kind of. It's have other commitments than the expansion of the market.
Yeah.
So I think I generally avoid subjective accounts. The analysis is obviously one about the structures of the market, and in general, I kind of if I'm talking about capital or economies, I avoid the subjective determination. But I think it's fundamental to Noboru's description, which is a hedonics description. In some way, it requires a subjective base to it. But I think there is fear. There's the forgive me, I have to refer to an article I wrote a few years ago called Tainted Love, Capitalism, Something, and Ethos. It's not called Capitalism Something, I just can't remember the full title right now. Pricing, I think it was. And there I'm relying on two economists, Jonathan Nitzan and Shimshon Bichler, who have a kind of post-Marxist analysis. They use Thorstein-Veblen as the basis of their analysis. And in a way, what's important for them are what they call hype, which is the kind of exaggerated enthusiasm on the part of the investor or the market maker for the returns to be gained from the market. And then there's fear as well, or fear. And I think so. I'm saying that partly to say that when I speak about fear, it's not simply like a subjective anxiety. It's also a sector of actors within the market who shrink back from market growth, or so it's like a sell moment, right? That's fear. And I don't think selling is simply about kind of a subjective or rational decision. It's also like a collective thing that market players do. And I think this, in a way, the analysis is driven by fear. If there's an interest in analysis on alternative asset class, it's because there's fear and anxiety about what's happening elsewhere in the economy, and you need different types of markets to compensate for increasing fragility and risk within commercial markets. So that's one moment of fear. There's a kind of insurance mechanism being placed through luxury assets, right? So the art market becomes a place to compensate for fear around increasingly fragile commercial markets. Like financial and stock markets and so on. There's clearly fear in the primary art market of dealers and gallerists to these changes within the art field, because the primary market has been organized through what I call a cartel structure. So you can see this in terms of you sell to certain collectors on the basis of what their collection is understood to be, where they stand in the art system, whether they're respected or not respected, whether it will serve what's called the career of, I won't be cynical about this, whether it will serve the career of the artist well. Right? So you might sell at a low price at the beginning of the artist's career to a certain collector, because later on this collector will continue to be interested, and you'll maintain, support of the artist. But of course, that also means that they're supporting the gallery because, like, the money's coming to the gallery. Right? So you make some concessions in order to kind of guarantee future revenues. That's the model. But that all requires this kind of system of nod, winks, dinners, like private exchanges, which aren't an open market. So the private market isn't really a classical open market. It causes lots of confusions to people who try and analyze it on the basis of classical economics or neoclassical economics, because for this reason, it's just like it's an opaque cartel. It doesn't even have the minimal condition of transparency of prices, which are needed for standard markets. If there's a move towards increasing regulation within the market, because financial institutions are going to enter it in a significant way, dealers are going to be scared, right? Because the whole structure of operation and the whole kind of career building mechanism, both for the artist and for the dealer and for the collector, won't be sustainable. There's fear for artists because if they're relying upon the dealer circuit to kind of establish a career in the art field, that becomes much more fragile and more vulnerable to market forces and sort of changes in winds. You see that in the East Asian markets and in India as well. But again, I think what we need to think about is that for all of its benefits, the primary market is extremely selective and doesn't serve most of the art field very well. It serves the people in the market very well, or in those who are represented by the markets. But that's a 0.1% kind of 0.1% selection mechanism. So
I just wanted to bring Noboru in. Noboru talked about the kind of uniqueness of the art market, and I think equally talked about the sense of art being like money, in a sense, not dissimilarly maybe to this idea that art becomes capital. So in the sense, the condition that you preempt is one that you kind of identify already. But how, when Suhail talks about the possibility of the regulation of the art market, how does that how would you envisage that from your perspective?
Yeah, thank you. That Suhail really describes that the present art, the mechanism very clearly. I think I have not so much the different opinion about such thing, but I want to make first of all some small remark about it. That he's talking about some sort of risk hedge type things, right? Risk hedge, because every financial market going up has some risk, and maybe art market can be alternative way to invest money on different way or something like that. And the intermediary time horizon, maybe it's right, but we had Lehman shock is 2008. You may have something. We have a lot of experience in the world history. It's 1929. We have the world depression, as you know. It's in the United States. It started all over the world. So in the long run, I'm talking about more than the perspective. I think it's really nobody can, only God, or even God cannot control these sort of things. I mean, alternatively, sort of that risk hedge market can exist within a very short time. And the 10, 20 years may be all right, but we cannot guarantee in the future something like that. So intermediate, the perspective, I think he's right. I think to regulate market or such things, a professional can evaluate it more correctly or something like that. But which I mentioned about it, this now, he's talking about that. Juan asked me about the regulation. It's somehow interesting, but one of the I don't say in Japan, for example, not on the art market, for example, in the land price market or real estate market, we have such sort of the regulation. We publish a lot of data for the market, and it's become much more stable or something like that. But in the art market, and just Suhail mentioned about it, is that the primary the market, it's artists and things. It's a very much competitive free market, right? So in this stage, it's all right. But secondary market, I think the player in this market, in auction, it's a very limited number of people. So in the economics viewpoint, it's a monopoly where such things happen. Unfortunately, for example, the auction is good, but it doesn't show that the real value. the game theorists already proved that second price auction is the most important thing. That the first price, usually the market this sort of auction, the highest the bidder can get it, right? But actually, this is not real value. And in another mechanism, we call this is a second price market. That second price auction is a first winner, highest winner can only pay for the second bidder. This is a real price. So unfortunately, this present auction system it's not necessarily show the real value. This is a problem. So of course it's a tradition in many historical background about it. So this is one point, and the other point is a participant of this sort of auction as very number is limited. And also it's also related to another market in capital market. But capital market also there are so many tremendous number of the people can now invest their money, right? Small amount, right? Also that the foreign exchange pounds versus dollar, dollars versus euro or such things. That many people, nobody can control it, right? So in that situation, I think it's of course it's a very much fragile in one sense, but it's in the long run it becomes some sort of optimal solution. But unfortunately, if it is secondary market, I'm afraid it's maybe some sort of biased market. It's not necessarily that the real market. Usually the economists believe that the market is good because we can get the Pareto optimal. It's a terminology of economics, but everybody become better, right? But unfortunately, most of the game theory says that it's only the prices which you can get. It's we call it the Nash equilibrium. Nash equilibrium is nobody want to change it, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is happy about it. So I think there are some sort of the problem of this economics viewpoint, a bit somehow problem. So regulation in a short time period, I think it's necessary. I agree, and it's all right. It's maybe good, but it doesn't necessarily mean that really good one. So we have a wrong way to do that way. So I'm sorry, it's a wrong answer, but it's a short answer to him. As regulation is maybe all right, but we have to think about the side effect of it. Yeah? If it is a person that you produce some artwork and you sell it, it's really people can buy it because that maybe some people are interested in speculation, and they can manage market. For example, they buy everything. And if the artist dies, then they can sell it, something like that. So there are many ways to get money, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that a real optimal situation, I think. So to me, I think it's do you understand that why there is some sort of regulation about the size of the player, like a monopoly is prohibited every country in the world, right? Because if people are dominated in the market, the price is controlled by such people. So I'm just afraid that, I'm sorry, it's become a wrong answer, but it's if players cooperate, it's a cartel, right? So they keep their prices in certain level for their own benefit. So we have a bit risky about this point, right? So we should be very careful about it. So I think that my idealistic idea is maybe you can sell. I mean, artists can sell by yourself, and not so much secondary the market anymore, and everybody want to buy it, right? So this is I think it's a really idealistic way, but now internet society can provide such sort of way. And of course, I have several friends of my friends as art historian and curator. They check that this is real one or not. There are many paintings. This is some fake, right? Such thing as a regulation is required. Professionals have to check it, right? But if they are involved in the real market and controlling prices a bit suspicious of.
See, so we have the strange situation with economists trying to protect us from economics. I just one of the things in relation to difference, and one of the things that was kind of chilling, Suhail, about.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know whether it was chilling or really it felt like quite an emancipatory statement. This idea that price and value conflate, that actually there's no difference really between price and value in the kind of scenario that you paint. Thought that was quite a. It's a radical point, but it's a very interesting kind of point, because our received wisdom, of course, in a certain kind of way of thinking, is that price and value are different things. I'm interested in this idea that they are the same thing. I just wonder if you can say a bit more about it.
I wouldn't say they're quite the same thing, but there's an economy between price and value. So just I'll take it up through Noboru's point around the secondary market. The secondary market is in no way a regular market in the art field. It is a cartel operation. There's very few people who can bid within the auctions. It's a restricted access economy. You usually know who the buyer and sellers are, and it's usually the seller who's buying the work back through the auction in order to kind of produce a public signal of valuation, right? So I think your hesitation to speak about the secondary market as a regular market is completely warranted in the art field, because it's in no way it's a totally corrupt market. So the kind of standard sort of neoclassical economic mechanisms that you're describing they kind of put up for display within the art field through the secondary markets, but that's not the actual mechanisms that are, or the power plays that are happening to generate that publicity. And also the other issue, I think, is that what's happening with markets in the art field isn't just the price point. This comes back to the question you're asking. It's not just the price point that's at issue, it's also reputational economies. So I think it's extremely difficult for artists just to sell their own work, because the whole point of the primary art market as we have it now is to establish a kind of cultural value of the artist by associating with this or that gallery, this or that collector, displaying here or there, so, and also the kind of critical discourse that's produced around them. That's the kind of thing we talk about in art schools, but we don't really talk about what price is doing in relationship to that. So the art field, the contemporary art field, is characterized by the combination of two economies. One is reputational, and one is market economy. And of course the two are linked. And the problem with art is that there is no value beyond the reputational economy. So, if your reputation sinks, maybe because your price drops, that's it. Like, there's nothing else you can rely on. All the critical discourse that's produced, all the meaning you put in the work doesn't mean anything, right? So the point I'd sort of pick up from yours, in a way, it's the point you were making in the introduction, which is we don't teach pricing and what pricing means in art schools. We talk about content and semantics. And maybe we talk a little about the art culture and what galleries and which exhibition venues and what those things mean in relationship to the artwork, or in relationship to like the development of our culture. But it seems to me fundamental, and in a way I think this is the political task. It seems to me fundamental that we seize hold of pricing as part of the semantics of the artwork. Okay. So if a Richter means something because of what Richter does around whatever Richter does, Europe and painting and that blah blah. But if a Richter means something for those reasons, as well as the price that a Richter has in terms of the significance, that's a high-end moment. If an artist at Frieze has significance because she or he is at Frieze, and is therefore seen to be selling and worth selling, those are effects in the current model imposed upon the artwork. So the artist delivers something to a dealer or a gallerist. There's maybe some negotiation of a price point, but essentially the dealer dictates it in relationship to a potential collector base. The artist can sort of like say yes or no. If they seriously say no, there's no future for the artist in that gallery, right? The question is whether what price does to an artwork and what it means for an artwork can be operationalized within the artwork itself. So for me, it's really important to think about pricing mechanisms as part of the meaning of art.
What about
sorry, and also to say that can be effectively utilized by producers, curators, people who aren't dominant market operators. to I mean, one sort of thought experiment would be supposing there was a maximum price on art. Supposing like the maximum you could pay for a poker file was $25,000. That everything would change, right? But in a way, everyone's got to agree to do that because there's no other reason. So unlike neoclassical economics, there's no sort of use or and I think this is a question of theoretical schemes. There isn't a kind of, for me, there's no hedonic condition for how art circulates, but it's also not organized through Marxist principles of labor. It's simply circulating within the market mechanisms. So in a way, it acts exactly like money does, because there's nothing underpinning money after the gold standard in '73. It's just money circulates against other money. But with the art field, you've got reputation and price. So the issue is kind of how if we understand that, what can we do with price as people who make things in the art field, right? Which isn't just artworks, but also discourses and so on and so forth.
Can I just pick up just one thing? I mean, in a sense, you're beginning to kind of suggest the way in which we might tackle the price problem with money. I was just wondering though about the idea of reputation and reputational economy and market economy, because clearly, well, it seems to me that in order to understand what reputational value is or what market value is, you have to have examples of things that have no reputational value or no market value. And if we're thinking about the 0.01% as the art that we look at and think about, what either kind of responsibility or dependency does that market have on the kind of, let's say, the underclass of artists who may have no reputational value or no market value? Because the system would seem to me to need that in order to function.
Why?
Wouldn't it need to somehow understand its value against things that have less value?
It needs resources, and it needs an in a sense with contemporary art, and I think it's specific to contemporary art, there's a sense in which the art isn't just about the market, it's also about sort of cultural currency in a way. And so that's partly the footfall, the audience as one of the measures that you were describing in one of the early slides. But it's also about how the art's circulating within our field. Right? So it's kind of like a specialized sector like ours. So I think the question you're asking is a bit like the Gregory Gillette point around dark matter. Most artists are sort of dark matter to the sort of firmament that we're exposed to and that we end up discussing in the art field. That's like the huge majority, and and as with dark matter in the universe, it's a thing that's kind of gluing the art field together as having relevance beyond the 0.1% or 0.01%. So in a way, if there's a broad interest in, say, frieze or biennial and so on and so forth, or what's happening in the galleries, that's the kind of cultural salience of the visible part of the art system. So it requires that for a sense that reputation has meaning beyond like the micro sector that's actually trading in art and sort of collecting it and so on. But my general sense is around the kind of the concentration that I was describing is that the market's going to break very soon. Or rather, the optimistic or the kind of the better version of what will happen is that there will be several art markets, not just one. If there's just one art market, then like, what's the point really? It's like, you know, if everything's going to become Hauser and Wirth, that's going to be, in a way, culture won't belong to art. Art as part of a culture that belongs to more people rather than fewer people is going to disappear, right? So it'll become something like the Lord Mayor's meal or something like that. If there's going to be a viable art field from which there can be revenues for people who are making it or involved in it through contributions, there's going to have to be more than one art market. That seems to me a kind of constructive way to think about it. It requires two things. One is to understand what the pricing mechanisms in that new market might be or should be. But also it's going to require the critical discourses that we have to give up this sort of this premise or this assumption that everything to do with money is bad. That's in a way contamination on the art field.
Well, I mean, that to some extent that seems to be maybe something one could have intuited from your point, Noboru, where you suggested actually the way forward was to do with was to grasp certain philosophies around a loss of self that would provide again a loss of fear, which might. But in a sense, that did seem premised on an idea that it would be a good thing to get away from conceptions of money or conceptions of the market.
You are talking about fear, right? Fear.
Yeah, I'm just in relation to you seem to be suggesting that you would champion that idea that we actually that the money was effectively a bad thing, and
no,
there are
I
ways in
don't
which
say
we could
that. I'm afraid I misunderstand you. But money is one of the most brilliant invention of the human beings, because of our development of our world is based upon this money. So money itself, it doesn't make. I mean, I don't know if it's your position, but to me, I think it's wonderful too, because it's very equal. For example, in an ancient society, that king maybe cannot. I mean, really, but or somebody cannot buy something because of his class, right? Something like that. The money is much more equalized, that it can buy. Everybody can buy if you have money. So it's much more democratic in this sense. So I have nothing against money, and I don't think no other way to use the money. So that what I insist in this talk is actually money and artwork as well has the same characteristics as a liquidity, right? Which I told you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this one is a human natures. So my ideas, I think we have to really accept and we understand it, right? And otherwise, that it's very difficult to say, okay, we can deny that the market price it's wrong, something like that. But I think it's personally, it's really difficult to say what is your criteria that the market price is good or bad. Because you can compare maybe some price is higher because compared to the same artist made something, and sometimes maybe some price is very expensive, and it maybe we cannot explain it or something like that. But if some people really like it, to buy it, it's his own something, right? It's no other way. It's his willingness to pay for that. So to me, I think it's not the prices or market itself is not necessarily bad thing in a free market, if it is a free market, or in a private good. But my point is that if it is a public good, which you understand what I mean. So this is another field, right? In the public things, everybody can join and can get the benefit of this artwork. It's a public, right? Public characteristic of artwork. Yeah. There are no prices there, right? This is a much more important point from my viewpoint, right?
Sure.
Because if it is so, it's no market cannot solve it, right? So we have to have another alternative way to measure it. And of course, the Suhail mentioned about it's very difficult to hedonic type things and to check it, something like that. But unfortunately, there are no other way. So everything is not necessarily private good characteristic, right? So art has a very strong, this feature of the public good, because the artist to create some new world, and everybody can get it in the future. For example, for example, John, the Mac, for example, computer. He has some idea to introduce some of the much more aesthetic things in the computer, right? And this is sort of new way of thinking, and then people follow that one. So this we call this is sort of the public good, yeah. Even though it's sold in the real market, but actually this sort of idea is so wonderful. So I think you can create something which not yet exists here. This is sort of in a large sense, it's a public good. And also people can join to see or to hear or to enjoy or something. This is a public good nature, right? Or if we have a concert here, right? Everybody can listen to the music now, right? Everybody can share this same beauty from that. So it's not one person can, get it all thing, right? So we can share. So if it is there some sort of characteristic of public good, the market mechanism doesn't work at all. So that my point, and it's better to really measure it, but it's so difficult, right? So this is a point. So then I said I have another the proposal
Yeah.
about this sort of risk future. Because we cannot control the real market. Of course, we can somehow stabilize it. Okay, I agree with him, because it's always something like that, maybe. And he said, I think it's always good to have some. But I think your role is not such thing, I think. Yeah, sorry.
I'm just going to stop because I'm going to open it up to
sure.
a few questions, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, I often get very confused about what's public and what's private. I must say. Are there any questions for Suhail and Noboru?
I would like to know what you think about the current expansion of the art activity, where big companies and even small companies are looking for artists as advisors, where artists are like solver problem, the people who solve problems in an artistic way or in a out of the box thinkers, and where the price of the hour of their advisor is related to the quality or the CV or the quality of the works, and at the same time the capability of developing in an artistic way process to make more money or to create more value in the market. So I wanted to know what you think about that, and also in education, if we can expect in a couple of years an MA in art advising in that sense.
Nice for the people who get it. It seems to me like the issues why companies or people, businesses, are interested in artists or creatives to generate sort of strategies and tactics within the market field. In a way, it comes. I think it's part of a general a broad move to the notion of capitalism as creative, friendly to creativity, and that the market can be. There's a kind of paradigm of disruption, which gets used in sort of management strategies to basically sack lots of people and sort of completely reshape companies or institutions in a new form. So it gets used as kind of alibi for restructuring. And in a way, but the paradigm of the question is why is disruption? I don't know if you followed the you probably don't want me to talk about this either, but the students at University of Southern California, Roski, all left the program, right? Because the program was being restructured by the principal of the college. They didn't like what she was doing, and they just said, like, this is not the course we signed up to. And then there was some internal stuff going on. But the paradigm that the principal, the chancellor, was using was like, Roski, which is now mainly funded by Dr. Dre. The ideology they put in, or the kind of the principle they put in for what they wanted to do to restructure, was that this USC Roski is a disruptive college. What we generate are people who disrupt standard paradigms, who disrupt the way markets work, who disrupt art education, right? Which they did. Just the art students didn't like it. But the creativity and disruption have a lot of legitimacy within the business field, and to that extent, they represent a sort of ethos of capitalization now. And you can understand why, because the model, I mean, it's a bit like Steve Jobs' model Noboru was just talking about. The model is that if you have a kind of game-changing device or app or some paradigm, it's not only that you're working within an economy in which there's diminishing returns because everybody's chasing the same client base, you completely change the economic field, or you completely change the consumer base, right? So disruption is a way of kind of generating new markets, which means like you have a whole profit stream, a whole revenue stream, which wasn't there before. So I don't think the practices you're talking about do that, but what they do is two things. One, they kind of give new ideas for businesses to change their business models or kind of find new venues for business, which is good for the business and good for the artists doing it if they kind of if they're successful. But what they also do is, in a way, they fold they fold the moment of creativity, which has traditionally been allied to the art field or the arts, into the mechanisms of capitalization, right? The problem is, in terms of critical discourses, we don't really have a language to deal with that yet, because what we've done is taken capitalism to be like a standardizing mechanism, right? So most of the critical discourses that we have, post-structuralism, critical theory, and so on and so forth, use capitalism as a kind of like a routinizing object, okay? Or it's a routinizing mechanism, which kind of strips away individuality or differences or distinctions, disruptions, and so forth. And actually, that if we hold on to those models, we can't deal with what capitalism currently is. At this moment in time, there really isn't a problem in the dominant actors of capitalization with the art field. Like the more you complain or find new models or differences or singularities and so on, the better, really. So I see the phenomenon you're talking about as a way in which businesses have incorporated the things that we develop or we promote within the art field within themselves, and they're really relaxed about it. The question is, are we?
Yes.
You are? Great, good, you'll do well.
We've spoken quite a lot, but we do have time for more questions. Go on.
Okay. Well, it seems like you kind of presume that we have this neoliberalism that will just get worse and worse or better and better, but depending on your perspective. But how come you think that is? I mean, like from a historical point of view, of course, these like economical systems will change. That was the question. That was the question. Like, you think it will just get worse and worse, or you think like now it's like 0.01%, and it will just get like this rich part of the world will just get smaller and smaller.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And okay.
What's your perspective on that number? You talked a
can
little
I-
bit about.
Well, I was also wanted to ask. I mean, in a way,
Maybe, can I? Yeah, I think it's thank you very much. It's a wonderful question about it. To me, I think it's yeah. Could you, the point is that I think frankly speaking, in the world, as the economics in terms of real economics doesn't. I always mention it's a happiness, right? So everybody gets some happiness. So I think it's this dynamism. We cannot deny this, which we studied it. I mean, of course, there are many critical points about it, but I think the important thing is if you are involved in like industry, for example. This one is artist you are talking about, right? And I think it's I think this college is very famous. I heard that it's for designing and to the car maker and so on, such things. I think it's a very important thing to be involved in society in this way, because you can do it. It's really you some very big power to change something like that. So I think you need not to hesitate to do such things. But to me, I think it's you have much more public goods characteristic of art, right? Of course, you can involve and you can work for the private sector. It's no problem at all. I think appreciate it because the real world is really dynamic by this sort of the private sector as well. So there are the meditator for creative activity, including this sort of things, which I think it's what you talk, right? This is one of the way. But I think there are another way. Mentor for all ages, from baby to seniors. You have a much more tremendous sort of the capability to be a mentor, right? Because it's, I think you are, of course, you think it's a 0.01% elite. You may be so, but it doesn't mean you cannot be a mentor for the baby or senior person, right? So better to open your mind and see, you can contribute a lot to such things. So because you are free ideas compared to other disciplines. So I think you can advocate these sort of things. It's also another role, I think. This is my question and answer to what you're talking. It's really good For example, Bernard Rich, he produced, like he came to Japan for many times and produced a very wonderful pottery. You know that, right? Do you know that? Bernard Rich, you don't know. He is a famous guy, and I think, and he made something. Some sort of this sort of thing should be, used for everybody, right? Something like that. So art can do a lot of things in this sort of way. So your involvement in the industry is very important, I think, because it's not a private room. Like everything in the public or in some, even in some sort of shape of the cup, should be beautiful, right? And what I'm saying is now in the real world, it's a excessive production. People are not necessarily want to buy it. This is a fundamental thing now. So it's so difficult to sell something, right? So better to create a good thing, really beautiful things, and all goods should be something. So artists can do a lot in this field. This is the second point, which, right? But first point also in the public good, I think you have to do it. So better to change whether the present world is, it's my viewpoint, it's maybe you need not to follow me, but I think it's a real production, it's so much. People are not interested by something, it's already they have, right? It should be beautiful. So I think it's public art is also the very big the domain you have to do it. In the public, for example, if you look at the London city, there are so much waste in the street. Why? Is it not dirty, isn't it? I think dirty, right? Should be beautiful. So artists can do a lot of things for doing such things. And if the London becomes much more clear, clean, and many people come, and automatically your so-called economy increase, right? So I think this we call this the externalities. So I think it's maybe one of the way you have to think about it. I'm sorry to talk too much.
No, I think Suhail had some questions.
Yeah, just to again, it's a kind of a difference in viewpoint. Need to be clear that for me, art is. This is just a difference between us. Art, I think, is not limited or directed to happiness or beauty. It's a activity for social transformation. But particularly in our world, it's a transformation against domination and exploitation. Right? The problem I have with the analysis, the terms of analysis, against exploitation.
Exploitation.
Yeah, especially through capital. So the problem I have with the analysis that you've presented is that you speak of economies about the gain of happiness, and money is a mechanism to do that. But of course, money is not equally distributed.
No.
So
you are right.
So the economy is a way of speaking about the distributions of capital, which is accumulated wealth, and money is one version of that. But money and therefore, or capital and therefore happiness, is not available to everyone equally. So the process I'm describing are an increasing concentration of wealth. So what I was interested in your discussion was that you speak of economies, but you don't announce that we live in a specific dominant form of economy, which is capitalism, which distributes capital disproportionately. And therefore restricts the happiness that can be acquired through consumption, which is the kind of premise for your model. So I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you approach the inequality, the issue of inequality.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's a very important question to the modern classic economics, and you would call it the neoclassic economics. And neoclassic economics usually never pay attention to the distribution which he mentioned about it, right? Because the basic assumption there is if you become richer, you are wealthier, then this problem may be solved automatically whatsoever. It's not our job or something like that. So he is right. So my point is like a public good, and government or some public sector is required because to moderate these sort of things, right? So I do not say everything is all right in the market economy, because public good is concerned. They need something other sectors like state or whatsoever, right? they have to do something. Distribution never can be corrected by all the market mechanisms. So I agree with him. But this balance is so difficult, and it depends on the country by country. There are some very extreme opinion, and some different countries have different things. So I cannot give an answer. But to me, I think this is the first answer what you are talking about. Of course, distribution is very important, and it's not so easy to solve within this market mechanism. Of course, there are some sort of taxation, for example, like the progressive taxation, or this sort of thing can help. Right? Do you agree? Yeah. So this sort is one of the way, but it's not necessarily related to art. But the point here, what I'm saying here is that I'm sorry to insist again, is even though we cannot be really perfect about that, right? So market mechanism has fundamentally this sort of the problem of the fear. And fear is not necessarily the problem of market. It's you. I mean, us. We have a fear. Market is only a mirror of us, right? So if you do not change, this is my point today, is if you do not change, nothing changes. It's not the responsibility of the government. So my viewpoint is I think we better have a different way of thinking. Otherwise, it's I think not so easy to solve it automatically. So this is my.
I don't want to give anybody the last word, but we are going to have to stop, I'm afraid. I'm sure the discussion will go on, and thank you very much to Noboru Hidano and Suhail Malik. Thank you very much.